to Where Are They Now? Chelmsford High alumni. I am Heather Lindstad from the class of 1985, and my special guest today is Ben Gasper from the class of 2002. Ben, so glad that you could take time for us and be on the show. You've got an amazing tale to tell us about your career, and I love the fact that we're going to start off saying that you kind of knew what you wanted to do at a very young age, which is kind of amazing. And I always think that we do, through school, find our passion. So tell us a little bit. Obviously, you went to Penn State as a theater major, but as a young person, how did you really get into the theater and what you're doing now at a young age?
Yeah, well, thanks, Heather, and you know, I'm very happy to be here and very happy to speak out to whoever's watching. It is kind of I want to say it's a unique story. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I did get involved at a very early age in theater, in drama, and it was through the Chelmsford Public Schools in 6th grade. We did a production. When I say we, it was mostly teacher run, I think at the time, a production of Little Shop of Horrors, and I think at the time it was probably Mark Branco and Eric Linsner's first year there. I feel like they were involved. I mean, this was 95, 96, so memory's a little fuzzy, I would say, at this point. But and I couldn't even tell you how I got from, we're doing this production to Ben, get involved. I don't remember that, but I do remember being backstage and just loving every minute of it. They had the sets, they whoever built them, they had the giant puppet that they had rented to be the plant from Little Shop of Horrors, and I was just fascinated by all of it. And I think from that point on, it was just any other production that I could get involved in. And I mean, at the time it was, I think they did a fall play and a school musical, in the spring. I can certainly remember after that production, I continued to try to stay involved, and I feel like I was working. I got special permission from my parents to work at McCarthy Middle School in the auditorium, in the theater. And I think I had to go sign a work permit so I could run the lighting board, right? And I remember doing the productions with the high school. This is me as a 6th and a 7th and an 8th grader. They would come in and do their productions. I remember doing them, right? Like, I remember Barnum. Barnum was a big production that they had done, and that would have probably been 98 maybe. Yeah. And that also took me off my feet. I was with all the older kids, and I was, having the time of my life.
Yeah. Now, were you influenced? You brought up your mom and dad. I know you have a sister, and were you influenced by them at all, or were they in the theater, or did it just that one day just kind of the spark just hit you?
I think it just clicked. I think theater people and the entertainment industry as a whole, we're a special breed of people. We're very welcoming to people of all kinds of walks of life, and it seemed to be the right amount of challenging projects with people who were all focused on one goal. My parents weren't in the entertainment industry or the theater industry at all, but they certainly allowed me to follow a passion, and I was clearly very passionate for it. I really wanted to do it. It was something that I felt very confident in doing, and so they just let it go and said, have fun, do what makes you happy. And that made me happy.
By the time you got to Chelmsford High, you were almost like the manager of it, right? I mean,
and I was certainly, I was absolutely.
Who were the teachers that were influencing you? And it sounds to me that they gave you a lot of leeway, and that's kind of one of the things that we all talk about as graduates of Chelmsford, that our teachers kind of gave us that, here you go, give it your best shot. We'll catch you if you fall, but it's on you to get it done.
Absolutely. There was
there a teacher? Yeah.
It absolutely was teachers. Coming up through high school, I think, Lauren Cochran had definitely taken over the theater program at CHS, and she was really the one that took all of the roadblocks out of the way and said, listen, let's go crazy. Let's do something, right? And even though Lauren really, if I were to put this in a different way, right? Maybe Mark Branco back in 6th grade opened the door, but it was really Lauren Cochran that helped me through the door, right? She really showed me that this is a thing, this is a business, this is something you can do for the rest of your life. And as a mentor and as a lifelong friend, she was always there pushing me to be better and do the best I could. And she always was willing to come up with something crazy to go do. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention somebody probably behind the camera here, Dan Sylvia, who in my early years, coming up through high school, he was a very heavy influence on how I came up through CHS. I know, and he went off to school to do theater too, and I followed him and did a couple of little things with him, but he was also another influence to kind of show me the ropes of what the CHS theater department really was at the time. But as Dan went off to school to start his life, it was really Lauren and I doing the theater guild throughout high school that really just opened the door and showed me what I could do for the rest of my life.
Now, was it hard when you were in school, already knowing, everybody goes through high school and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? But to take other classes and not just want to be like, hey, I should be on the stage, I should be building this, or I should be testing this. Was it hard, or did you feel like the teachers just knew what you were doing, but still guided you through English and the languages and math and stuff like that? But was it a little bit of a challenge to be?
I was a terrible student. Oh my God, I was a terrible student. And I think every single one of my teachers probably knew every time I walked into the classroom that my head was somewhere else. I was either developing a set design or in the process of building one or in production, putting something together in rehearsals. They knew that, I was going to go to school all day, and then starting at 3:30 till 7:30, we were going to be in rehearsals. Like, I think they knew that. My English teacher, another good friend, Dawn Gabriel, I think she had done the theater guild with Lauren for quite a time during my high school, and she was my English teacher at one point, and I think she knew, and she gave me latitude to follow my passion. But I was a terrible student, and I always wanted to my head was always somewhere else.
Well, you had to have had a great profile or something and good grades, because you then found your way to Penn State.
That's right. And I'll be forthright with you. It almost didn't happen, because I had, when I was a senior in high school, I had applied to 2 schools. Penn State had a great theater program, and my parents were both alumni at Penn State. So there was a natural push towards Penn State. But I also applied to Wentworth School of Technology in Boston for their construction management program. And when I made the decision, it was really about following what I really wanted to do, which was theater. And I think my parents were always a little ho-hum about me going to school and paying all that money to go do theater, but it worked out in the end. And they were thrilled to death they were thrilled to death that I was going to go to Penn State.
Yeah. But so at Penn State, did you find your way through a lot of people and connections and networking that way to get into the industry that you're currently in?
Yeah, the industry as a whole, and what I mean by that is the entertainment industry. That's everything. There's like 2 degrees of separation between any given person, and so it's all about who you know and who you went to school with, and they can put you in touch with different people. And my professors at the time, they were the ones that really took me under their wing and connected me to the broader industry. But but while I was at Penn State, it certainly was an opportune time to hone my skills and understand that that the industry wasn't just building theater, building sets. It wasn't that. It was a huge industry, right? I thought in my freshman, sophomore year of college that the end all be all of my life was going to be building sets for theater. And it wasn't until about halfway through that the professors kind of opened my eyes and said, listen, you don't have to just build sets. You can do so much in this industry. And that's how they helped nurture that investment in a lot of technology. I spent a lot of time doing heavy technology in school, and then they pushed me towards a place that would really help me with that.
So was that their push too to Circus Delay and those kind of things? Is that where it kind of started? And
absolutely. The end of my college.
Did you get in at the start of Circus Delay, or was it already going? Because it
was already going. I mean, Cirque du Soleil is a big global entertainment company, right? Like, I would dare I say nearly everybody's seen a show at some point, whether that's under the big top or in an arena, or if you've gone out to Vegas, right? There's 7 shows out there in Vegas. And through probably sheer chance, a professor of mine at Penn State used to work at Cirque du Soleil's at the Bellagio Theater. And when I had graduated Penn State, he put me directly in touch with the technical director at and said, you got to hire this guy. And, after lo and behold, that's where I went. And it's kind of a freeing feeling that I got out of college and I put everything I owned into a big truck and I drove across the country to live in Las Vegas for 5 years.
And that was not hard, I gather.
I could opine for hours on what it's like to live in Vegas, but I'll spare the audience that diatribe. But yeah, I ended up working for Cirque du Soleil at the Bellagio Theater for 5 years, almost to the day. Yeah.
So was there a big project with them, or in this? I just feel like you've been creating and had a lot of freedom. Is that how it works, or are you always working with the company and the artist and whoever you're working with? And it's got to be a huge communication thing about what they want and what you see and how to create that. Am I right on that?
Yes, you are. I would say you kind of split it into two categories at the moment, right? When I moved to Vegas and I started to work for Cirque du Soleil, the show at the Bellagio had already been open. It had already, it was already operational. They were doing shows 5 nights a week, 10 shows a week. And so probably, and it's interesting that you mentioned this, I actually hadn't thought about this. When I moved to Vegas to work for Cirque, it was probably the first time in my life where I hadn't been focused on creating something, right? Because was operational. So it moved my career towards a path of what we call operations, right? It was just, let's keep the showroom operational. Let's do the shows, make sure that every show goes off without a hitch. And I spent a few years right at the beginning working for Cirque, just doing maintenance on the entire building. Like, these shows are so complex. There's hundreds and hundreds of axes of motion, all the winches and hydraulics, and not to mention at if anybody's familiar, right? Like, there's a 1.5 million gallon pool, right? Where half of the equipment is underwater. So I dove in the pool 3 or 4 times a week because a lot of the gear is underwater, and the only way to get there is to go underwater. So it's funny. Yeah. Working for Cirque was more about operations and how how we can keep the show moving and how we can keep the show going.
Well, within that, though, you've moved to Tate, right? A leader in the industry. I know you've worked with some huge stars. Because I know I wrote a trivia question about you, and I know you've worked with Pink. I'm sure. Who is the most famous, or is there one show or 2, 3 that you could tell us about that were just so like so hard for you to do, but yet such a big rush that it went off as well as you could make it?
Absolutely. My career at Tate is 8 years going right now. And I've seen the big acts, I've seen them all. I've traveled the world and just done some crazy stuff. When I first started, right, I was 2 months into this job, and they immediately throw me on a huge Bon Jovi tour.
Having to invent some stuff to make this happen. The columns that are coming from the air, the columns that are coming from the ground, to make them telescope at this speed, come in and come out, it's tough.
And state of the art. Automation is bringing some new technology onto this show that is a world unveiling. We haven't done it anywhere else.
And that was the first big one, like that we worked from, November 2012, straight through Thanksgiving, straight through Christmas. Beyond Bon Jovi, I've done Katy Perry, I've done her tours, I've done Taylor Swift tours, I've done Pink tours. Those are the big ones. The Taylor Swift 1989 tour was probably one of my favorite strictly tours that I've done. Yeah. That was a really cool tour to go do. Those are the big tours.
Though, like when you're doing those tours and stuff, like, they have suggestions and ideas, and then do you get to be creative and say, well, this would be best, or you know what I mean, and tweak different things, and from show to show, do you have to make those kind of like adjustments and stuff like that? Or
so I guess you
don't really watch the show, you're watching your show, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess the best way to describe this is, right, let's say Bon Jovi or Taylor Swift, or so somebody wants to go on tour, right? That tour hires a production designer who comes up with the way the tour looks. And then that production designer comes to Tate and says, this is what I want to do. And there's a lot of design creativity in that back and forth, because oftentimes what the designer wants isn't grounded in reality. Like, we have to take into consideration things like gravity and what people can physically do. And so there's a lot of creativity in that back and forth. But once we finally settle on a design, Tate has 6 weeks generally to put it together. And it's a mix of, existing assets that we have and building brand new things. Yeah. So once we've built it, that's where my job came in, which was we took things off the manufacturing line and turned them into the production.
And back in high school, though, you had a bet with somebody. I know I read this somewhere, I don't know where, about making a house spin or something like that. So is that still in your mentality sometimes, like right now, like, oh, okay, you know what, I would love to pitch this idea? I mean, do you still have that kind of thought process too?
Always. It never leaves. It never leaves the back of my mind that there's something that somebody thinks you can't do. Well, nothing is impossible. That production that you were talking about was Noises Off, right? And I would say that was probably the show. I certainly used it in my portfolio to get into Penn State. I still have my portfolio, right? Yeah. I used that set to get into Penn State, and the bet, I don't even remember who made it. Maybe it was Lauren that actually, said, do you think you can do this? I bet you can't do this. I can't even remember, but it was a 2-story, it was a house. We built a house on McCarthy Middle School stage. And at the time, right, the high school didn't have its own theater, and McCarthy stage was used for classes. And so not only did we build a house on McCarthy Middle School stage, that house split up into 3 pieces for the show, but we also had to take that down several times and lean it up against the back wall because they had to use the stage for classes, right? So like, I can't even tell you how many times I must have taken it down.
So is that better than holding an Oscar? And
ooh, there's a, It's a great segue. They're different parts of my life, and they're different points of pride in my career, in my life. After I kind of came off the road at Tate, I got into it, and it's really because doing rock and roll is great and fun. You're creative. You get to be on the road. You're sleeping in buses. You're a roadie for a time. But that kind of lifestyle isn't really for everybody. And for me, I was growing tired of the bus life. So when I came back, I really started to get heavily into these like what we call one-off projects, where it's really just hey, we're going to go do this one thing. And that's how I kind of came into doing the Oscars for my company and what we supply for the Oscars. And that's how I kind of got into it. And the Oscars fed such a primal desire within me, because I was back in a theater. I was creating a production, and we had you get one shot at it, right? That you get one shot to make it right. And that's it. It's all live TV viewed by 20 million people. You get one shot. And that thrill is just amazing to do every year.
I can't even imagine the sweat and the holding your breath to make sure.
Absolutely. And we've done some big things in 2020, like right before the world ended. We did a huge one that really, like, I was grinning, like baring my teeth the whole time. We had this huge, like, circular set piece that spun and went up and down, and it was filled with video on the inside and the outside. And the thing weighed probably 25,000 pounds that we were flying over people's heads in the Oscars. Like, there's no room for any mess up. And last year's, that 2020 Oscars was probably one of the most proud moments in the Oscars that I've ever had.
Wow. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So now with all the craziness, are you back at it and things are turning around a little bit more? And we all have to get through this COVID thing. So I would assume that every industry went through it, and you're back going pretty much, right? I mean, they're starting to do live shows.
As they say, the entertainment industry as a whole was the first to get shut down.
Right.
And will really be the last industry to come back online.
Okay.
But there's certainly light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train. We think that, and you tell me, your audience can tell you, right? Like, everybody wants to go see a concert. There's so much pent up demand to go see a live performance, to go stand there and scream your head off to Katy Perry, to scream your head off to Pink, right? There's so much pent up demand that we think maybe by the end of 2021, and certainly 2022, we'll all be enjoying this, enjoying our fellow people standing next and, seeing a concert, going to Broadway, doing the things that really make us feel alive, right? Like, the entertainment industry is a great thing to talk about, but it's all art, and art, I personally feel, is something that's a necessity to just living a full life. You got to go see some art, whether that is a off-Broadway show or a small-time tour or a comedian or a Taylor Swift concert or a Cirque du Soleil show. I think you're enriched in life by going to see those shows, and we all have to get back to it. Otherwise, we're all going to be crazy, right?
Ben, it has been unbelievable to speak to you. I truly believe that young people do find their passion, and some forget to follow it. And good for you for following your passion. And I'm glad that the people of CHS and all the schools, the Chelmsford Public Schools, helped you in that. So I wish you all the best. I'm going to keep following you. And you're right, when you can come back and we can do this show live, and you can come back and visit Chelmsford, that would be a wonderful thing. So
I'd love to. And thank you very much for having me, and thank you to your viewers.
Thank you.
It's been great.
So to everybody, we are hoping that you watch the show, you get a little enjoyment. So to everybody, thank you for watching. Where are they now? And we'll see you for our next show.